Good evening and welcome to the January 23rd meeting of the Civil Service Commission. May we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Manukian.
Here.
Commissioner Gazarian.
Here.
Commissioner Hatamian.
Here.
Commissioner Gantis.
Here.
Chair Devine.
Here. Next item, please.
Oral communications.
I have no cards. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address the Commission on any item that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, please.
Minutes.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve. Second.
Okay, do we have unanimous consent? We do. Next item, please.
Eligible lists established.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this item are the eligible lists that have been established since our last meeting. As you can see from the report, all but one of these are actually what we refer to as layoff lists. And I should sort of correct myself. These lists were established back in November when the employees in these classifications were in fact laid off. And this was a layoff of pretty much the second round of layoffs that the city undertook in the past current fiscal year. This involves mainly water and power employees. As you can see in several of these classifications, electrical helper, line mechanic, apprentice, station electrician, when an employee does get laid off or reduced and bumped down to another position, they retain a spot on a layoff list for the position they formerly held. So if we do come to a point where we have the ability to rehire individuals and obtain those funding necessary to do so, we go to that list and select the individuals off the list. So those first 8 lists are in fact layoff lists. The final one is a police officer recruit list that was established this past week. As you can see, this was an open recruitment process, 626 applicants. Once we got through the process of the written exam, physical agility, and oral boards, we're down to a list of 38. So again, this item summarizes the lists that have been established. If you have questions, be happy to try and answer them.
Any questions?
I have one question.
Okay.
Go ahead, Commissioner Gansis. Did you say, Mr. Doyle, that the list was established, the classification was established last week on the police officer recruit?
I believe the list was established for the police officer recruit last week.
When you say the list was established, are you talking about the 626 or 38?
38.
The 38, okay. All right,
Yeah,
thank you.
meaning this is the tail end of the process. Once
Okay.
all the exams have been completed, everyone made it through, we have an establishment date of the list, and I believe it was last week.
Do you have a question?
Yeah. Few questions. Not just the list now with the 38. That list is good for 2 years. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
And do we have? Are there currently openings that were? I know this is for openings that occur over the 2 years. What typically is our hire off of those lists? I mean, obviously, we're probably not going to hire all 38. I wouldn't think. So do we have generally we say a certain number of that 38 would probably get hired off of the list.
And Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gantis, the number varies. It all depends on the number of openings we have. We just reached the period of time where there are a lot of retirements. Typically, the December is the time for a lot of retirements. So I anticipate probably making contact with as many as 10 individuals on this list from the offset, beginning a background investigation process, and hopefully hiring maybe a half a dozen or so. So the numbers sound about right.
And I understand it depends on a lot of budget, amongst other things. Do we have what is unclassified? That's just a regular police recruit. I'm not sure I've seen unclassified before.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gantis, earlier this year we had taken this matter to the Commission to establish the position of recruit as unclassified.
That's right.
The non-sworn position, and it's a position that again, whenever the individuals holding it have no property interest rights anyhow, it's a probationary level position. So,
I remember that. thank you. So this is not, but this is a recruit. This is not an officer, actually. It's a step to an
It's
officer.
for the
but it's a
recruit,
Okay,
yes.
fine. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the next item, please.
Class specification for approval, wireless communication series.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this item is a revision of an existing series for wireless communications. The primary change to this series is the addition, I should say the re-addition of a supervisory level position within this series. Many years ago, we formerly did have a supervisory level position within this series. A few years back, in a cost-cutting mode, we eliminated that and really put the position of the wireless systems technologist, which is the sort of the second highest position in the series, in more or less in charge as sort of the lead worker of this group. The technologist is probably the most highly technologically competent individual of the group, and the thought was to have that individual essentially act as a lead worker and go over the others, and the others would all report to the administrator. We found that over time that probably is not the best structure for organizing this group, so we're more or less come full circle, and we believe that it's appropriate now to have that supervisor position back. So we are adding that to the series, and as far as filling that position, it's my understanding that we're going to reallocate one of the other positions and fill this promotionally, where one of the others, whether it's the technologist, the senior, or even one of the technicians, could all compete for that position. So I don't believe we will be adding a new a budgeted position, but rather the title and the classification will be included in the series. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Russ Kwan from my staff worked on this specification, and we have Steve Horonic, who's the wireless services administrator, here as well.
I have a question that was similar to Mayor.
Please.
Mr. Doyle, is this the same as we visited at a previous session where we have the series, in this case the wireless communication series, we have definition, essential functions, minimum requirements, which apply to all of the following specifications or classifications, and I note 4 of them: the systems technician, the senior wireless systems technician, technologist, and then finally the systems supervisor. All 4 of these would be required to have the minimum, which is on page 1 and 2 of 6,
That's
correct?
That's correct.
And then the additional, I suppose also half of page 3, and then the additional as it applies to each position.
That is correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And towards the end of this series, you have, as the positions get higher,
Right.
gradually increasing level of responsibility, duties, minimum requirements, and you'll note an elevation on the years of experience and
Right.
general responsibilities. So,
And all except the supervisor are non-exempt, the supervisor being the only exempt.
that is correct. This will be a
Designation.
middle management position, exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act.
Right, okay.
Mr. Gantis.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. I note the wireless system supervisor is, again, a mid-level and a mid-management, I should say, and a exempt position. And I note that in the minimum requirements, it's desirable to have a degree. Would we not, maybe for the supervisor, want to have a degree in either, what is it? I know computer sciences and or
Electrical engineering.
electrical engineering. It seems to me if we're getting up to an exempt position, it gets to be similar in my mind to moving up into, to more, as I say, mid-management, that a degree would be something that it gives, if they're in the lower level, they have something to attain to go get that other than just coursework, or at least additional coursework, 2 years of coursework. Just seems to me a little more education and knowledge in that area might be something appropriate. But if I'm asking for something that's practically not practical, then we can deal with it. But that would be my saying on that.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gantis, it's a good suggestion, and typically someone supervising, it'd be nice to have the college degree and some formal education in management would be very helpful. That is required of Mr. Vronick's level at the administrator, is not at the supervisor level, and again, maybe Mr. Vronick can add something here, but I think what you're looking at in someone in this field is somebody who really knows the business, who knows radios, and college degree may not be absolutely essential. And as with always, we may not want to exclude otherwise well-qualified candidates by imposing a college degree requirement. In fact, I'm not even sure of his current staff if there are any who have the degree. Or
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, Steve Vronick, Wireless Administrator. It's actually fairly rare to find in this industry, especially in the two-way radio industry, people who have college degrees. There are a lot of people that have AAs. That wouldn't pose a problem, I think, in recruitment. I'm hesitant to require a bachelor's degree.
I'm okay with an A. It just seems to me that if you're going to have an exempt mid-management position, that some 2 year, I mean, again, 2 years of college or level classes and an AA, if you're saying that would be something I would think would be appropriate.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable.
Fine with that.
As a requirement or as a desired?
No, I think a requirement.
Right.
I think we already have it under desirable, right? A bachelor's
Yeah, we
under
already have a
desirable.
bachelor's desirable, but I think we could require a 2-year degree, and we desire a bachelor's.
So then my question is, since we have a bachelor's degree as a desirable qualification, what type of bachelor's degree were you guys thinking about when putting down that it would be desirable to have a bachelor's degree? Is there anything specific?
Computer science or electrical engineering.
Just
Okay.
computer science.
So can we make that a requirement? Or would that be, again, something that's rare in that field?
For the bachelor's degree, it wouldn't be a requirement. For the 2-year degree, we're looking for somebody who can supervise people. If it's in I don't know, I'd have to defer to Mr. Doyle. He has a lot more experience in hiring people in supervisory positions than I. You think those 2 specific degrees, or could another...
typically, we would list the discipline of computer science, electrical engineering, and then say or a related field, and the related field could also be management or something like that. If we're looking at exclusively that supervisory position.
Mr. Manukian, did you have a...
Just a suggestion, I think we should let you run your department as, in a sense that, not make it a requirement.
Desirability.
I think you know what it takes to run this position, and I would go with desirable, but not tie his hands in a sense that if he gets an applicant that's my thought.
Okay. And I think...
Would be a concern. Again, I've not done an assessment of the internal candidates for this process, and I don't know if any of them have associate degrees or bachelor's degrees. And it would, if we want to proceed to change this, that would be something I think would be relevant before, because it could, in fact, then exclude several of them from applying.
That's exactly why we did desirable. Thank you.
And I was going to ask Mr. Doyle or actually ask you if we did put the requirement in, as Mr. Gantis suggested, would that preclude any of the candidates that you feel would be otherwise well qualified?
Exclude internal. I think it would exclude almost everybody internally.
Okay. I agree with Commissioner Manukian that we're going to let you run that, or at least in my opinion, we let the administrator run the department and pick out the best qualifications, and the least restrictions we put on that, I think, are the better. Mr. Kazarian.
Thank you. I noted in the education experience column that you are asking for 5 years of responsible experience in various tasks, 3 years of which must be, and I interpret must as mandatory, in a supervisory or leader work capacity. And then you've added, beyond that, coursework in electronic and RF theory and whatnot, computer science, etc., may be substituted for up to 1 year of experience on a year-for-year basis. With that in mind, I would support my colleagues to my right and left with respect to not making it mandatory, especially on the AA degree, because my understanding of an AA degree is basic education, and it's not really going to be useful for the task of the individual in this mid-level supervisory position. Whereas the 4-year, I think I would propose we leave it as desirable and not mandatory, so as not to exclude otherwise qualified folks who don't have something on the wall that says bachelor's on it. That would be my.
Okay, so
that would be my,
with that being said, do we have a motion?
Exactly what he said.
Mr. Chair,
I
may
move.
I interrupt? I do want to note that we amended this, and you'll see it at the dais here, a slightly revised version of this.
Oh.
And the only change was, and I'll refer you to page 4, under wireless system technologist, we caught an error at the last minute. It formerly said, under the supervision of the Information Services Administrator, meaning Mr. Veronic, and we changed that, of course, to the supervision of the wireless system supervisor. So that's what this change is. So if you could make the motion on the amended.
Motion to approve based on the amended
As presented.
as presented.
second.
Second? Have a second by Commissioner Kazarian. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Manukian?
Yes.
Commissioner Kazarian?
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis?
Yes.
Commissioner Hatamian?
Yes.
Chair Devine?
Yes. Thank you very much, and we'll move on to the next item.
Report on advertising expenditures, October 2012 through December 2012.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this item is your quarterly advertising expenditures report. This is a report that's usually prepared by Narne Kasparian. She's currently on leave, so Mr. Alex Soto stepped in and assisted on this. This essentially reflects the expenditures from October 1st, 2012 through December 31st, 2012, essentially the second quarter of our current fiscal year. During this period of time, there were $4,159 expended on advertising. The total budget for the fiscal year is $30,000. To date, we've spent $9,906. So we're below or at least on track to be within budget on this. And this is. This also includes a rather significant executive recruitment that we're currently undertaking for the Chief Information Officer, which typically we spend a lot of money on those types of ads. But we have stayed within budget, and if you want to look at the detail of the report, this is typically broken down into 3 categories. The first, which focuses on journals, publications, and websites that deal with targeting ethnic communities. The second category typically are the trade-type journals and specific websites focusing on a particular profession or trade. And then the third category is sort of the general newspapers that don't focus on any particular area. So with that, this is a note and file item. If you have questions or concerns, be happy to try and answer them for you.
Well, Mr. Manukian.
Yeah, just a comment, all the years that you've been presenting this to us, you know how to budget these things. I mean, you always keep it very tight, and just wanted to congratulate you.
I have a similar pleasant remark. I note that out of the $30,000 budget, we have now gone through 2 quarters, and the figure 9906.68 is over $5,000 below the budget allocated for the first 2 quarters if we were to divide it equally. So with that in mind, my question is, appears that the remaining balance of $20,000 and some change for the following 2 quarters, if it goes the same way, we're likely to have a surplus as to this endeavor. Do you anticipate that from quarter to quarter, the expenses may somewhat differ depending on the need, but do you have any kind of a specific projection, or you think we'll be okay with the budget regardless?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kazarian, I do anticipate us staying on target with this and probably end up only spending a little under $20,000 and probably closer to $15,000. The big shift in advertising in my lifetime, in my career doing this kind of work, has been that shift away from print advertising to web-based advertising. It's cheaper, it's easier, it's quicker, and most of these websites, and particularly with some of these trade publications, are free. I mean, for example, you look in the second category, we ran ads for the Chief Information Officer. And as you know, this is the department head for our Information Services Department. Probably the best source of candidates for that particular recruitment was this website operated by the Municipal Information Systems Association of California. I mean, this is an organization that specializes in government IT professionals, and that was free. All of that was free. So the shift away from print publications has been very helpful on our budget. We do try to keep about the same amount in our budget each year, just in case we run into a situation where we have to do an executive recruitment, where we hire an executive search firm to do the recruitment process. That typically will run you around $20,000 to $20,000, and so I do try to keep that budget a little bit full in case we run into that situation. And the last several department head or executive level positions that we've filled, we've either filled them internally or the city manager has had essentially the HR staff conduct those recruitments, as we currently are with this Chief Information Officer. I'm essentially the search firm for that for that recruitment, along with my staff. So
I've never even seen you get close to that number. You keep this up, and they're going to cut your budget.
Along that line, I was going to ask, if you have a surplus at the end of the fiscal year, does it carry over, or do you have to go in for a new allotment?
It's lost. It's given back to the
General fund?
budget reserves. So.
Good job.
And that's the way it should be. A lot of people have the notion that in government, spend it or use it or lose it, and that's one way of looking at it. But we don't need a particular allotment of money. We spend it. It makes sense to waste it.
I wish my wife would understand.
Any other comments on this item? That's a note and file. We'll move on to the next item, please.
Agenda forecast.
Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is our agenda forecast. At our next meeting in February, we are having the presentation by the Verdugo Fire Communications Center. I think Mr. Gantis requested that this be put on the agenda, and we're happy to do so. We were sort of planning to do that today. However, the administrator over the Verdugo Center is away at a conference either today or this week, so we'll have that on February 13th. With that, there's nothing else really on schedule. As you know, there are some hearings that are currently ongoing, and the Commission is quite busy with those items. But Otherwise, this is our report, note and file. If you have any questions, happy to answer them.
I have a request. I had stated previously that I will be out of the country on February 13, and unless there is a...
February 13th?
Yes, I will be out of the country before that date and on that date. Unless there's an urgency, and if Commissioner Gantis is inclined to agree with my request, I would very much like to be present during this presentation. But I note that Commissioner Gantis is not here on February 27th. May I ask if that could be reset for March 13, where both of us will be here? Commissioner Gantis, would that be possible?
Mr. Chairman, you can request anything you like, as whether I agree is your concern.
Well,
It's not mine to say.
I'm asking.
The only thing about March 13th, and I was going to ask, Mr. Chairman, that this be, we will be deliberating on a closed session item on March 13th that might be longer. I mean, it could be maybe not as long as some, but longer than others. So I don't know how long the presentation is going to be, but I mean, I think it can be done on March 13th.
Mr. Chair, we can adjust that to the appropriate length given that evening. And I think the March 13th may in fact be the last opportunity
I agree.
to do this. So
I agree.
I think speak with Chief Scoggins and staff, and I'm sure they can accommodate.
And if they cannot, I understand, but perhaps you let me know, and I'll see if the DVR will tape.
Okay.
And maybe I'll watch it on DVR. Thank you.
Okay, any other items on the agenda forecast?
Just, Mr. Chairman, Matt, would you add that on there so that we make sure that next meeting everybody sees this, because we do need everybody on March 13th for the deliberations on the closed session item.
Okay. Next item, please.
Civil Service Commission, staff comments.
Any of the commissioners have comments? Seeing none, staff? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item.
Closed session.
Okay, at this point, we're going to adjourn our open meeting.